Liberal pundits love to bash Fox News and conservative talk radio, and the feeling is obviously mutual. But such criticism is striking when it comes from a lifelong Republican and former White House speechwriter for George W. Bush. There was the piece by David Frum on the cover of New York Magazine, How the GOP Went Mad, My Party's Break with Reality. He is the founder of FrumForum.com, now a CNN contributor, and he joins me now here in the studio. You say Fox, talk radio have built, and let me quote here, a whole alternative knowledge system with its own facts, its own history, its own economics. You're tarring with an awfully broad brush there.
Well, let me say, I remember the world before these institutions came into being, and I remember welcoming their arrival. I worked on the Wall Street Journal editorial page for 3 years, and there was a time when, in an overwhelmingly monolithic liberal media narrative, they provided a corrective.
And then what happened?
But let me give you a very concrete example. Some of your viewers may have heard the story of the Obama administration's war on Christmas trees. You'll remember this, that they were going to tax the Christmas tree, and it fed into a story about, this Muslim-y kind of president trying to destroy a Christian holiday. This was a huge, if you watch CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times, this story didn't exist at all. It was a huge story in these alternative media. What was it about? It was about American Christmas tree growers struggling with imported Chinese artificial Christmas trees, trying to put together their equivalent of the Got Milk campaign or the Beef What's for Dinner campaign or Pork the Other White Meat campaign, and assessing themselves to fund an advertising campaign. Maybe a good idea, maybe a bad idea. I don't even observe Christmas. I don't have a dog in this fight. But to turn this into an example make this a ground for a cultural conflict, to create a sense in large numbers of people they're being persecuted and attacked, at a time when the country's in so much trouble, that's how this thing is fed.
When you say that outlets like Fox immerse their audience in a total environment of pseudo-facts and pretend information, was Bret Baier doing that when he interviewed Mitt Romney on Fox and pressed him in a very testy interview? In other words, you seem to be indicting almost everybody at these outlets.
Look, the question is, what is the... you can always find good people doing good work in bad situations, and you can find people doing bad work in good situations. Mm-hmm. The question is, what is the impact on the viewer? And we know, for example, that people who watch a lot of Fox come away knowing a lot less about important world events. And
well, you're assuming a cause and effect there.
I'm not assuming, but that's a correlation that we know. But here's what we can see. Let's go from the Christmas tree to the biggest story in the world right now, what is going on in Europe, and what the United States can or could do to help. One of the things you have to understand this crisis is what drives it. If you participate in the alternative knowledge system, you would think that what is going on in Europe is a debt crisis. There was a big article in the Wall Street Journal op-ed page just the other day by Senator Jim DeMint. There are hundreds and hundreds of these articles about how Europe is in trouble because of its debts. Spain has a lower debt level than Britain. Britain is not in crisis, and Spain is.
But let's get to the why. Why do you think, since you were very specific, conservative talk radio, Fox News, why do you think they are pushing, in your view, and I'm not buying into this, in your view, they are pushing propaganda, false facts, pseudo-facts, pretend information, toward what end?
Because these media institutions, they started as political projects. They started as ways to offer an alternative point of view on current events. They have become an important industry. And so they see the conservative world not as a set of ideas, but as a demographic. And the way you appeal to a demographic is working by conflict. This is the oldest rule in how TV works. And I wrote a history of the 1970s that made this point. TV enhances its own credibility by destroying the credibility of all other institutions. And you can see this in polls. When other institutions' credibility decline, TV's credibility goes up. The old advertising motto for local news stations, we're on your side, against all those other people who are not.
Right,
so
this is a certain amount of demonization. This is not
You need to create conflict, and you need to create a sense of embattlement, and you need to create a sense that we, this network, are your only reliable friends.
And liberal outlets don't do that?
Liberal outlets have historically not done that, because liberal outlets, until recently, didn't know that they were liberal outlets.
Oh, they were operating under a false self-portrait.
But this will come, and this is a general poison that is happening to American culture and American media. Yes, the liberals are now catching up with results as bad, and if I were a liberal, I would be writing about their problems and worrying about them, but I worry about my team.
This is not, let's talk about your team. A couple of years ago in Newsweek, you wrote about you said the Republicans would regret ceding so much power to Rush Limbaugh. First of all, what happened to your television career after you wrote that?
Oh, I used to do a lot of Fox TV, and every once in a while I would get a call from a Fox booker booking me for a show. After that, and an hour later, I would hear quickly back. I would always say yes, even if I couldn't do it, just for the game of it. And I would be told, we're going in another direction.
So you feel like you were effectively blackballed from Fox?
Yeah, I'm not going to. I'm a big boy, and look, CNN is a great network. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, but you also say that the seating. How was the Republican Party ceding power to Rush Limbaugh? He has a very popular radio show. That doesn't mean that he is running the GOP.
What it means is look what has happened in this primary year. Look at in this year of incredible Republican opportunity with this terrible economy, this weak incumbent. Now look at the field of challengers. How did the field get so weak? That wasn't an accident. And how do we take?
It wasn't an accident. Those are the people who chose to run.
Where are the other people?
They chose not to run.
They chose not to run because in one way or another they understood that they would be unacceptable. They couldn't get the platform. The talent pool got constricted. And then even those who do run, who do have the talent, somebody like Mitt Romney, who's good at running things, he has to reinvent himself as something he is not, and something that the American people will like a lot less than they would like what he actually is, in order to make his way through this process. You know,
let me make this a little more personal, because you say in this piece that some of your Republican friends are asking whether you have gone crazy.
Yes.
Given where the party is and where you are and how you've become a pretty caustic critic of the GOP, are you still a Republican?
I'm still a Republican. I look forward to voting for the Republican nominee for president in 2012. I have, on my site, I've written about what is wrong with the president's health care plan. I've written about what is wrong with the stimulus plan. I don't like his foreign policy. I don't like what he's doing in the Middle East. I think generally he's a weak and passive person who's not good at the job of being president.
To be fair, some in the conservative media, George Will, for example, have gone hard after Newt Gingrich. In other words, there are conservative journalists or right-leaning columnists who are willing to take on members of their own team, or at least hold them accountable.
Good for George Will, and I'm a big George Will fan. But here's the most fundamental question in this year. How did, in this year of terrible economic distress, their fifth hard Christmas in a row, how is it that we have a party that is running on the theme of deficit reduction and that does not have ideas about how to stimulate the economy and make things fair? Why was the payroll tax cut, for example, not a Republican idea all the way back to 2009?
Just to connect the dots in our remaining seconds here, you criticize the direction and the tactics of the Republican Party, but I'm not clear on how the media, the Fox News and the Wall Street Journal editorial page, have somehow forced the party into this direction.
Because there have been people who are more creative. Somebody like Rick Santorum, for example, is willing to say, hey, upward mobility in America is not only not the best in the world, it's one of the worst in the world.
And what happens to those people?
And they are utterly marginalized.
Deliberately?
Look, deliberately, it's an ecosystem.
The net effect is?
It is an ecosystem that has its own rules. So if you go on TV and say, there's no other country in the world where you can be born poor and become rich, you get a huge megaphone. If you tell the truth, which is that most of the studies show actually the United States is worse than anybody except Britain at upward mobility, there is no audience for you. And yet that's an important fact from a conservative point of view.
A provocative conversation that will continue in many forms. David Frum, thanks very much for joining us.